Roundtable discussion show where we discuss all things fire service related. Firefighting Today is a production of PeteLamb.com. And now your host, Chief Peter Lamb.
Well, hello and welcome. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about the European versus the American Fire Service. We're glad that you joined us. We have some trouble with the YouTube video side, so tonight, in lieu of that, if you were watching us live on Twitter, we would ask that you can send a tweet with the hashtag @PeteLamb, and we'll try to get you into the program with us. So, without further ado, we'll introduce the panel. We'll see what we got here tonight and see what we can make happen. So, here we are. My name is Peter Lamb. I'm the author of PeteLamb.com. I'm also the host of the Firefighter Training Podcast. We'll start all the way down at the end. Adam, why don't you say hello?
Good evening. Adam Ganaway, captain with the Kellogg Volunteer Fire Department right here in Kellogg, Iowa.
All right. Ethan.
Hi, Pete. Ethan Bansek from the city of Lorain, Ohio, student of the trade and founder of Pass It On Fire Training.
Perfect. Thanks. Greg.
Good evening, everybody. Greg Howard. I'm the Deputy Fire Chief for the Dashwood Volunteer Fire Department, way out on the west coast of Canada.
All right. Good enough. Our presenter tonight, Joe Starnes. Say hello.
Good afternoon or evening, as it may be. Chief Lamb, thank you for having me. Joe Starnes, Project Kill The Flashover, Oak Grove Volunteer Fire Department, Kings Mountain, North Carolina.
Thanks, Joe. John, say hello.
Hi, John Cagno, retired Chief North Providence Fire Department and founder of Lead It. Thank you, Pete, for having me.
All right. Rob.
Good evening, everybody. Rob Fling. I'm the Chief of the Dix Hills Fire Department on Long Island and the founder of Face Peace On.
All right. And Shane hasn't been with us for a while. Nice to have you back, Shane.
Hi. Good to see everybody again. Shane White, captain with Paris Island Fire Rescue.
All right. Thank you. And last but certainly not least is Warren. Warren, say hello.
Hi, guys. Warren Whitley, retired Chief, Prince William County, Virginia. And tonight, broadcasting from the Southport Fire Department in North Carolina.
Great. Great stuff. All right, so here's the deal, folks. What happened is Joe recently did some teaching over in Europe, Germany, and Poland. He's got a little presentation for us. We'll get some discussion as we move along. Again, just a reminder to the folks that are viewing, if you are watching us live, if you send a tweet with the hashtag @PeteLamb, we should be able to bring your questions and discussion into the program. So, Joe, do you want to switch over? And when you get your slide up, I'll just go right over to you.
All right, we'll do that. Hang on.
And again, if we do, panel members, if you do have questions, let Joe get a few of the slides out there, get going, and then we'll see if we can get some questions moving. All right, everybody should be looking at that. Everybody thumbs up on the panel if you got that. Everybody good? Yeah, we're good. All right. All right, good. So go ahead, Joe.
Well, the trip was a trip to Poland, to Ryan, Poland, and then Warsaw, and then from Warsaw back to Stuttgart, and from there to Göppingen, Germany. And I spent that time with my host, Dr. Robert Reick. So this is just about that trip and some of the things that I saw. Everything here tonight here will be about Germany, not about Poland. So basically, I knew nothing about Germany when I landed, other than I knew where it was on the map. It's a federal republic made up of 16 countries, and it's part of the European Union. It's got 1,300,000 firefighters, according to Wikipedia. When I was there, I stayed in the district of Göppingen. That O has a double dot above it, which has 2,500 volunteer firefighters and less than about 60 paid or career firefighters. And Göppingen is one of 35 districts in Baden-Württemberg, which is in that country or the state of Germany. This is on one Sunday, I went to a blessing of a new fire engine. They had a new fire engine dedicated. It was delivered. They had the priest there and the they blessed the fire engine and the fire company. The community came out. Pretty much a one-engine house in the rural part of Germany, and Dr. Reick took me there for that celebration. What you see on the left picture is their first pumper they bought was in 1921. It's a 1901 pumper, I think, and they got it in 1921. So a hand pumper, that rail the officer's holding there. There's a rail in the front and a rail on the back, and 4 people on each rail, and they line up in 4s, and when they get to be relieved, 4 move out and 4 move in, and they have 8 people pumping. That's about a 120 gallon a minute pumper, and I forgot the liters, but that's about what that pumper is. And on the right is where they won some competition, where they were pulling it on some history days, and they were pulling it down. The red van in the back is what their new engine replaced, and their new engine would be a little larger than what our mini pumper would be now. So we'll talk about that in a minute. This is Dr. Reick. Dr. Reick is the Kreisbrandmeister. He's the head fire official for Göppingen, and he is also a professor at a university. He's also the inventor of the smoke blockade. He's also the head fire officer for that district in that state in Germany. He is, the picture on the bottom right is from his office looking out across the town. So that is his fire chief's car. By the way, that is a nice ride. They get one of those. Mercedes' factory, of course, headquarters is in Stuttgart, and they lease one of these at a very reasonable price once a year, every year. So that's quite a nice chief's car. This is the first engine out in Stuttgart. I went there with Stefan Fuchs and Ronnie Finelson. Both of those both those guys have been to Kill The Flashover, so was Dr. Reick. But this is the station they run out of, and of course Oktoberfest was in full swing when we got there, and it's right across the street from this main station. But this is the engine that the first out engine associated with that. This is the engine pulling out of the station. You notice the crew area here, and can you see my cursor, guys?
Yes, we can, Joe. We can see it fine. We got those gold arrows, and we can also see your cursor moving.
All right, so the pump panel is behind the roll-down panel here, and these are hose carts. By the way, I didn't know it at the time, but those are powered. They're actually charged, and when the engine stops, these drop down, and the engineer can pull. We'll talk about a little bit how that works if you don't already know. Ladders on top. GVW of this apparatus is under 36,000 pounds. This is the ladder in Stuttgart. It's a 30-meter ladder. It's right at 100 feet. Interestingly enough, it has 4-wheel steering. They demonstrated it, and it showed it crabbing or cantering like a horse across the parking lot. It can go up to a place and then move sideways almost, lateral. It's a pretty interesting piece of engineering.
Hey, Joe, just before you move off that, is there any, did they talk about weight limits, or is that a light duty thing, or is that fairly heavy duty? I mean, it's not uncommon here to have.
They don't engineer much above 35,000 pounds, Chief.
In terms of the vehicle, I'm talking about the ladder load.
The ladder load is 3-person load with, I think, 1,500 gallons a minute.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I know it was 3-person, and I forgot the GPM. Of course, it was liters, not gallons. You know.
Right. Okay.
But it's a 3-person, and of course they don't vertical vent roofs. off their ladder either. So we'll talk about that in a minute. This is the other side of that same ladder. The generator, everything's compact and really, really mounted and well engineered. Everything has a place about everywhere I went. This is in the basket above it, and the controls on the ladder in the basket. And I don't know much about ladder trucks, so I'll be very naive, but everything's computerized on this truck, and so you can tell the truck, you can dodge hazards, lines, etc., and come to a point on the building, and you can hit one button and it'll follow that same path back to the ground, the way the safe path you programmed it. It will follow it back. The apparatus marking is the type of apparatus is the first number and the number of that apparatus in that area. So this is a type 4 apparatus, and this is the 48th unit in that area. So that's their call records right there. All the crew areas, no matter where in the little engines or the big engines, look like this. I never saw one that didn't look. Everything was in a case. Everything was strapped in. Everything was clean. And I saw numerous stations. But this right here, for instance, I think is glass cutting for extrication. Vehicle. That box. So we'll go over some of that in a minute. Here's the tool. Here's the pump. The cones are in there. You can see how everything is strapped in. Hand lines. This is the supply line. This is 75 millimeter, which is about 3 inches, 20 meters long. So those are rolls, and these are not in the baskets. These are just extra ones in a roll. You see all the everything. See how the nozzles are hung upside down? We'll talk about the baskets in a minute. But when they grab a basket of hose for deployment, or they connect to the cart you saw the engineer will deploy, they also grab the particular nozzle they're going to fight fire with. The tack lines are 42 millimeters. That's somewhere between 1.5 inches and 1.75 inches, not quite either. It's 15 meters long. They give about 300 liters per minute. That flow is a lot smaller. All their flows are a lot smaller than our flows. Major flows. So you can divide 4 liters into that, and you get the gallons per minute, basically. It's not really quite 4, but it'll give you a rough estimate. So you divide 4 into 300, and that's the gallons per minute. So an inch in our case, equivalent 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches, and this is going to flow what, 75 gallons a minute, give or take a number or two. Is that right? There it is. 42 millimeters is 1.65. 15 meters long is 49 feet long.
Hey, Joe, you're mentioning attack lines. Is the tack line different than that hose we saw rolled up?
Yeah, this is
supply.
The 75 millimeter line is a water distribution line.
Okay.
It's like our 4-inch or even 5-inch.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to make a difference there.
Yeah. By the way, the cart we saw on the first engine has got a lot of this 75 millimeter on it. That cart, the engineer will roll it out from the pump out to a what we would call a water thief, or they call it a distributor. And the one I saw at the fire at night had 3 outlets on it. All connections are Storts connections, where they're nozzle, engine, or whatever. Pumps. Everything I saw was a Rosenbauer that I saw. 1,000 liters per minute for the smaller trucks. Again, divide that by 4. That's about 250 gallons a minute in our world. The big trucks, the one that you saw coming out of Stuttgart was 2,000 gallons, 2,000 liter per minute, which is what, 500 gallons per minute. Didn't see any larger pumps than that at all. From a hydrant, they're doing 1,600 to 2,500 liters per minute, and the pump pressures are rated at 8, 10, and 12 bar. And bar is about the same thing as atmospheric pressure. See down at the bottom down there, 14.5. So when you talk about 10 bar, that's 150 psi, basically. So that's how they're rated. Tank is 2,000 liters, which is 500 gallons of water. The hydrants are 100 meters apart in every city. They're in the ground. There's a sign on the side. You go read the sign. It tells you how far to walk out from the sign and how many steps you walk right or left to the hydrant. They got snow markers on the side if they need them, but that is a connection to the water supply right there. You see. They have bigger ones. And they have the ones that are automated with the carts. The cart can roll over the top of it, and it will automatically hook the cart to it.
Joe, we had a question. Do they have any pumpers that are capable of drafting water from a static source?
Yes, yes. Matter of fact, they carry, their rural trucks all carry those portable floating pumps. But all of them will draft. That I saw. Everything I saw would draft. See the suctions there?
Right, at the top of that, yep.
Yep. Here's another. Everything I saw was extremely clean. I was so impressed with the organization and the this is the back of the, looking at the back of the discharge side of the pump, and this is the nozzles, and they're in there like I told you, Chief Land, they look like wine glasses hanging upside down, you know. But that's how they select their nozzles, and everything was in cases or in strapped and labeled.
Joe,
this was a fire.
Joe, just before we get to the fire, you talk about that. I mean, I've seen apparatus in the States that were organized pretty well. What was it that struck you? Was there some attention to detail that you can't verbalize, or what?
Well, what struck me was a couple things. Was if you fought fire in one department, you could fight fire in any department you went to.
Okay.
The trucks were absolutely organized the same way.
Okay.
And then everything was, I couldn't find dust.
Right.
I was struck by the organization. Everything was a procedure. Their engines are called 1 plus whatever, 1 plus 6, 1 plus 8. That's an officer, and then ever how many firefighters are all seated in that apparatus. But most of them are 6, not 4.
Right.
Did I answer your question?
You did. There was also another question. You said it on the front end. Was this regional or national, Joe? The department structure, is it regional or national?
It's by state.
By state. Okay.
Yeah, and then there is a national, the Federal Republic. Like Dr. Reick reports to a federal officer at like what would be our Department of Homeland Security, kind of parallel, not necessarily that arrangement, but he is at one of those states inside that country, and then that country has a head, and then they all report to the federal republic. There is no their laws require that the states provide the fire protection. So there's not a federal fire service.
Okay.
There's
Thanks.
federal things they support, but there's not a federal fire service. This was a fire about 2 in the morning. This was another thing that struck me, back to what struck me. Dr. Reick has always talked to me about stairwells. He never makes a presentation that he doesn't talk about controlling the stairwell. Every structure I went in that had more than one floor had an isolated stairwell. Every structure I went in was cement, concrete, brick, or steel outside. There's no burnable exposure out here. It's the most amazing thing I have ever seen. I go in one building, go in the next building. This was concrete. When this burned, they went up and inspected this from the ladder on the roof right here. But this is non-flammable roofing. I don't know the material. It's like consistency of concrete, but it's not. But they were looking under it here. This is an attic space that they had converted into apartments, and you'll see in a minute how many apartments are in this place. But they control the stairwell. The engineer will advance a line with that cart about, I don't know, 50 feet or so. I'll get the right numbers in a minute. Out, put the water thieves on it, and it's connected to the pump. At that time, that water's waiting on the firefighters, and they also connect to the hydrant in the ground. And all the hydrants are no more than 100 meters apart, so the connection to the water supply is always short in this city here. This is a basket that they use to carry the hose off of that engine, off the apparatus, and then they deployed it once they got upstairs. This is the actual attack line there, I think, and then there were 20 apartments in this little place right here. That's the number of intercoms. And then here was the major noticeable differences about what I saw. Back to your point. There was very little. Everything I saw was stone, masonry, and steel. Even the balconies were steel. They weren't flammable. The stairwells, everything that had more than one floor had a stairwell, and had a door between the stairwell and the apartment. Their major style of home is the grandfather lives on the first floor. The children of the grandparents live on the second floor, and the third generation lives on the third floor. And that's pretty common. The apparatus has very short wheelbase. The GVW for those apparatus maxed out, like I said, at 35,000. They had a couple that were more than that. They had one that was a subway car that had rail trucks underneath it, and it probably weighed, I don't know, it probably weighed 50,000 pounds. But it was called Bad Bath. It was the nickname. Lines either were rolled or deployed in baskets from a distributor or nozzle selected each time. In other words, there were no pre-connects. Everything was Storch connections. All the crew sizes were standard. They have a lot of volunteers. Like I said, the one that Chief Reick Dr. Reick has, he has 2,500. He calls it 2,500 volunteers, and that's a lot. Storage connections, crew size standard, hydrant spacing was maximum 100 meters. The hydrant carts were powered. They do not vertical ventilate roofs. Ladders go up and provide alternate access, alternate escape routes off the first floor, typically, or they flow water horizontally. And they don't vent, except they'll vent where they're fighting fire. And they will energize a stairwell. You know, compared to us, we have different stairwell configurations. We have different laws on occupancy. We have a lot larger and a lot heavier apparatus. We do have pre-connected lines with attached nozzles. We of course use threaded connections a lot, except for water supply. Our crew size varies in the United States quite regularly. Hydrant spacing varies on occasion. Apparatus and firefighter lay hydrant hose where they roll it out with the carts, and we vertical vent and we open up to control the environment. They don't do that. So that was just generally the overall. One thing that was very obvious.
1 second, Joe. Joe, if you don't mind, can you hold on 1 second?
Sure.
All right, so one of the comments was Christine's wondering about the whole, her question is, you know, what's the success of using smaller apparatus and lower GPM? Well, obviously the question is not how much success, they've been doing it for years, but we also had a couple of questions from the panel relative to nozzles and flow. Did you want to address that?
All right, which one we want to tackle? I haven't been reading that. I've been trying to think of what I had to say. The nozzles are variable flow. What kind of nozzles do they use? They use fog nozzles or combination nozzles, and their flows are, well, like I said before, their flows are 75 gallons, 65 gallons. They're a lot lower than ours, big time lower than ours. But they are fog and combination nozzles. What else we got, Chief? Working pressures, very almost what would be equivalent to what we would call low pressure nozzles, Chief. You know, when you talk about 4 bar, that's 60 psi, 8 bar, you know, 120 psi. The small engines are just rated at 8 bar. That's what they're rated at. They're rated at like 250 gallons a minute and at 120 psi. They're not large compared to what we consider large. You know. I didn't get a chance to go to any high rise. I didn't have a chance to see the configuration of that, but their fire protection discipline seems to be really, really well maintained. So they just don't have the. I didn't see the variance. Of course, I didn't see everything. I was visiting. What else we have here, Chief? We have. I'm looking back through the comments. What is it? Is he a doctor by choice, or is it more a requirement for advancement? I don't know the answer to that question. Dr. Reick's a civil engineer by trade, and he is respected in Europe for his ability to calculate, and he did some of the first major calculations for flows, air movements, and air. It's not air hydraulics, but air calculations in buildings, multi-story buildings. He's respected for that all throughout Europe. What else we got here? The fire department is by the state. There's what did I say? 32 in that individual country, 16 countries in the Federal Republic. So there's 1,000,003 firefighters. He is a district chief. That's what his title is. What else I miss here?
Hang on one second, Joe. For the folks on the panel, on the internal panel, ask these questions out loud, fellas. Joe's trying to manipulate the thing. If you've got a question, throw it right out to Joe, and that way it gets, taken care of.
I've got a question for Joe. Or go ahead, Warren.
All right. Joe, do they have any high-pressure rigs like the Swedes and the English have?
I didn't see any high-pressure rigs at all, like we talk about with Sweden, etc. Matter of fact, it was just the opposite, Warren. I saw more low-pressure stuff than I saw anything. I didn't see anything beyond 12 bar. Does that answer it? Okay.
The question from me, Joe, is the rank structure similar to what we see in North America?
Yeah, they have. They didn't use captain, lieutenant. They had. They were terms that were like crew leader. They weren't crew leader. They had another term. But they were like 1 and 8. You know, like if you got an engine there and he had 8 people, that was a leader for that particular set of people, and so he would have been like the other one. He would have been 448's crew leader, and that he or she managed that whatever was assigned to that apparatus. Everything was responded out of the station that I saw. Nothing was a private motor vehicle. Matter of fact, they had vehicles to haul people there. They also had SCBA vehicles that could carry 25 air packs. They had communications vehicles. Matter of fact, that 4-story fire that we went on, they dispatched a communications vehicle with 2 people in it, and they did all the comm between the communications center and the fire ground. Everything went through them. They had all the pre-plans, the radio networks, software, whole 9 yards. That vehicle was dispatched along with the ambulances. The rescue equipment was dispatched, and then there was 1 ladder and 3 engines dispatched to that apartment fire.
Hey, Chief.
Yes.
Going back to the major notable differences, we got an echo here. Pete, you getting that as well?
I got it. I just muted Joe. The echo is coming from Joe.
Okay. All right. So getting back to the notable differences, do you think, as far as the environmental control issues, how we vent versus how they vent, is predominantly because of the construction differences, or is it just their tactical procedures?
Joe, you've got to unmute.
I said that's a good question. When I say it's a good question, it means I probably don't know the exact answer. I will tell you this: they don't vent for the reason we vent. Okay. that one apartment fire, they had an exhaust hole in the window. That window was burned through when we got there, so they didn't actually take that window out initially. They will pressurize that stairwell, and then they'll go to the floor, the access to the floor of that, and they will hang a curtain, and they will pressurize at low pressure that apartment, and they will cause the flow to be directional, unidirectional. They will apply moisture into that, flow into that, and then they will go in and suppress it once they control extreme.
So they compartmentalize the seat of the fire basically, and then go from there, because it doesn't seem like they have the same issues as we have as far as fire getting into walls and stuff.
Well, they were worried about that, and the one that we went on, yeah, well, it won't be the same thing, to your point, especially in the Northeast. All right, there a lot of that stone, masonry, brick, and heavy timber if it's wood. So they're not getting the balloon construction and the lightweight construction. They don't. I didn't see any of that. I didn't see any of that. They're not. Their toughest challenge for them usually is commercial, and they have a lot of industry there. They have a lot of industry. I mean, a lot of the major engineering firms, are there. They have railways. The Autobahn's there. They're building a 15-kilometer tunnel for the Autobahn through a mountain. There's different things, but from your point of view, what you just asked, that one fire, they were checking it for extension into the wood members in the roof section of it, but they didn't have the concern or the rapid fire growth that I think we're used to.
Joe, we got a question from Greg. Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, Joe, I'm always curious when I see the European PPE, so the helmets, and wondering, I know the breathing apparatus is much from the same manufacturers, but did you notice any drastic differences in the PPE?
Well, the coats, helmets, and the coats and boots and the ensemble was pretty much similar. The helmets are different, of course, and helmets are more engineered as a one-piece firefighting unit. You know that routine well. The helmets are not; they don't weigh 6 pounds either. And they are. And I will say this: the two fires that I have responded to, nobody was dressed in less than full gear. Nobody.
All right, Joe, you got a couple more slides to do, and then we'll take some additional questions. Your audio went south now, too.
All right. Probably the biggest thing for me was an interesting, obvious thing about there, and not that we don't do it here, but I was probably just reflecting on my own experience more than anything else. I am not saying anything tonight that says one is better than the other or anything. I'm just saying what I saw. It was very noticeable that what Reick did there for respect. Dr. Reick was as concerned about not dishonoring his rank as he was about receiving respect. Matter of fact, he was more concerned about dishonoring his rank than he was about being noticed as ranked. But everybody was very respectful of position and role. Everything was immaculate. Everything was clean. Every station I went in, everything was clean. Not the the metro stations had a lot of equipment in it. The rural stations had one piece in it, and they were just like the fire station we went to in the little town where they dedicated the unit, the new unit. The station was a one-bay station. It was one bay. You backed it in. It looked like my old days. You backed it in, you pull it out. You went behind the wall, and you pull the curtain back, and you picked out the tables and put the chairs where the truck was sitting. That was the total equipment for that station. Organization of the equipment and having it in the same spot, having it easily identified was apparent everywhere I went. The whole systemic thing, the fire safety, fire protection, the engineering. I went to Dr. Wright's office and it looked through some plans they were looking through, and it looked like our fire protection system looks. We don't look that much different, but there's a lot of difference in the variability of it. They just don't have the variability. I mean, you don't have. I never saw. I'm in the homeland of two major manufacturers of cars. I never saw a junkyard. I never saw anything that looked like. And I rode through the country a lot. I went through one old World War II Air Force base and a couple other places, and it was just clean. It was intention to not having the rubbish fires or the trash fires that I'm used to seeing. And the ice thing that I noticed most of all was that the equipment from apparatus to apparatus, from station to station, was the same stuff. There wasn't this variability between them. If you knew how, as a matter of fact, there was conversation around some of the variability they had, which was interesting. They had a minor amount of variability, and they were talking about it, probably getting to where we are with that, but they just didn't have that. So you went there. Now another thing is that station I went to where the truck was dedicated, they had an inventory list of the gear they had in 1886. They had 80% of that inventory list in their museum. And I'll tell one war story, and this will be my only war story. They had the metal fire helmets with the spikes. We know the German. I don't know what the spike on the helmet was called, but they had, I should know, but they had the German helmet. And then beside it, they had the leather helmet. Can anybody tell me why, that I haven't already told, can anybody tell me why they went from a metal helmet to a leather helmet?
Getting back to the war years?
Well, it could be, but here's the answer. They got electricity. And when they got electricity, the ladder people who climbed ladders were climbing with metal helmets and sticking their heads into wires. Wasn't working real well for them.
And talking to the wrong guy about that.
And they went to leather. I thought, you know, how ironic about our evolution and how we're getting there, and all those things. You know, where we come from in our history and all. But they went to leather helmets, and that was the beginning of the leather helmets for them. I don't know how. You know, I don't know the story anywhere else. I saw the tobacco thing. All their places were tobacco free. There was no smoking, no chewing. It was completely tobacco free.
What about the general public, Joe? Do you see much smoke in there, or is that fading out?
To be honest with you, I didn't make a point of it, but I can't recall one. I did recall it in Poland, but not in Germany. I had a 5-hour bus ride in Poland, of which I never understood a word that was said in that 5 hours.
Here's the good news, Joe. They didn't understand you either.
Well, they don't hear either. Hey, Chief, they don't hear either, so it's okay. You know?
Right. So what do you got left for slides, and then I'll bring you back on screen.
I think I'm done, sir.
All right. So why don't you come back up on screen? I just muted you again, Joe, because you got a bit of an echo. When anybody else pipes up, you've got a bit of an echo. So questions for Joe or other comments, or what do we got left to do? If you are listening to us, I know we lost some viewers when the audio went bad. If you are listening to us, you do have a question. If you tweet at Pete Lamb, the @ Pete Lamb, we'll try to get your question in here, certainly. Anybody from the panel, other questions or comments as we begin to summarize?
Yeah, he had up a slide, inventory clean and ready.
Yeah, okay, hold on a minute.
No,
Yeah, so what's your question, John?
It's not really a question. It's just like inventory clean and ready. And you think about how well organized, how impeccably clean and standardized the equipment was, and then, you know, how we kind of just throw things about in the apparatus. You know, it's considerable difference there. Cultural, big difference.
Right, there's the slide we were looking at.
Yeah, it is a, it was just noticeable, Don. It was just, everywhere I went, it was noticeable. And in some of these places, we just dropped in. It wasn't like there was a formal event. And I went to 2 formal events, but we also just dropped in several places. There was quite a bit of training, quite a bit of competition. In the day we were doing it, the engine thing, they had their extrication pump and their tool out there, and they had a little rig where they had to pick up 5-inch bolts and drop them through a hole, and then pick up 5-inch rings and stack them 5 high. What it boils down to, you had to be able to manipulate the controls on the spreader, and you also had to be able to turn it at all angles to be able to do that. And they were timing it, and that was competition. That was part of their compliance training for that particular tool. Pretty interesting stuff just to watch. I mean, it's not a big difference. It's not like this is like something that I think the most important thing I learned about all of this is that sometimes my paradigm of how it should work keeps me from considering 4 or 5 combined steps that would work better. You know, if you say we're not going to use pre-connected lines, or we're going to use pre-connected lines, if you tell them they're going to pre-connects, or if you tell us we're going to manually deploy lines, all that stuff would cause great consternation among us all. But the ability for their engineer to get to a distributor point out to a point and get water there was fast, it was efficient, and they hooked to it, and then they deployed, and the baskets roll the hose out. It was really quick. It wasn't as cumbersome as we would think it would be, because we don't do it that way. Now, if they had to deploy the way we deploy lines, it would be very cumbersome, I would imagine. But we got to talking about what advantages that gave us if we did some of that. If we didn't do all that, for instance, what if we put our foam eduction, not eduction, but proportioning, not eduction. What if we put our foam proportioning at the distributor point? I mean, we could pump Class A every time we went out, really easy. So I'm just brainstorming. That doesn't mean we should do any of that, but I am saying part of what keeps me from understanding how things might get better is sometimes when I take one element and don't look at the whole system. Their engineering, their fire protection, their construction, their deployment packages, how they do things. The water flows are less, but their fire engineering, fire protection doesn't require the amount of water. There's a lot of confined fires in what they do. There's not a lot of exposure fires. All those things make up a total system of response, not just an element of something we might go talk about, whether we're anti-venting or venting or whatever we're doing. They do not stand on roofs, and their roofs are much sturdier than ours. They just don't stand on roofs, period.
Joe, can you come up on screen so we can chat?
Sure.
Other questions for Joe as we begin to summarize?
Joe, I was curious, have you noticed any differences in the training standards or the amount that they train and that sort of thing, whether it be the career side or the volunteer side?
You know, they have something similar. Of course, they're mostly volunteer. You know, the place I was at, there was 2,500 volunteers. But they had they didn't have Firefighter 1 and 2 like we have, but they had a series of trainings that would mimic what we would call those kind of skills. And they went through that same rigor to get there. They had academies just like we have academies. And they have and then they have training, company level training at their facility. The Stuttgart one, it has a full-time training staff, and that they have training towers, and they have classes and rookie classes and the whole 9 yards, just like we emulate them or they emulate us, one or the other. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
You know, the interesting thing to me was the way they deploy, the gallons per minute they flow, and the discipline of that, and then their whole engineering protection system. That was the interesting thing about it. I mean, they got that line up that 4 stories. They were up that stairwell as fast as we would have pulled it pre-connected. But they did have more staffing than we do. But they went up that stairwell. They went up that 4 flights of stairs. That one picture I showed you of the storks going through that railing was the last flight. That's where they pulled it through and hooked it up and locked it. But that was the last flight of stairs. But they did that extremely quickly. There wasn't any delay.
I got one for you, Joe.
Yes, sir.
I know, I guess they finally have blockades in every department over there. And this is going to touch on your other trip. Did you see any of those in Poland?
No. They talked about them, but I didn't see them at all.
So Warren, let's just clarify, when you're talking about blockades, for the people that are viewing, we're talking about smoke curtains, if you will. You want to just make sure everybody's on the same page there, Warren.
Well, you just did that. So the portable door is what I call it. But I guess, Joe, in Germany, though, since they're now widely available thanks to their insurance industry, they're routinely coming off the rigs with them then on each call.
Yeah. The baskets, you saw that one picture with Dr. Wright of the curtain in the basket. The basket now has a clip on the side where that curtain fits in. So when one of the baskets come off, the first basket that comes off to deploy the lines inside has a curtain with it.
How's it hung?
I'm sorry?
How's it hung, Joe?
The curtains are just mechanical extensions that just pressure block themselves to the top of the door casing. They work like cargo jacks working a truck. If you're familiar with that.
Yep.
And they just slide out, pop, and lock. Now their curtains have about Dr. Wright's curtain has about what is it, Warren? About 10 inches of gap at the bottom.
Yes.
Something like that. So it's not a complete block the way they do it. Dr. Wright tries to get a unidirectional flow. His whole concept with that is to get it all going one direction. Now Poland was really enamored by positive pressure attack when I was there, Warren. And they were messing with it big time. And but
Joe,
that was,
another question
that
is
was one,
the question about the volunteers. how are they able to maintain so many volunteers and staff stations is the question from Christine. So how do they manage to do that with just a skeleton crew?
Well, they weren't having any trouble recruiting at all, and some of that I'm not real sure I know the answer to. But when you're talking about, we would have had in where he had 2,500 in a really well staffed volunteer system, we might have had 1,600. It was just, there's just a lot more. Now they are mandated to equip them. They don't fight over equipment, the best I can tell. They fight over when they change equipment, what's going to be standard, but they don't. There's no argument about whether or not you're going to have an air pack and it's going to be high quality and all that. It's there. Yeah, I never heard the word fundraiser in the whole deal. The small towns are. There's a word they used, and I don't remember it, but a small town, and it has its own mayor and assistant mayor, but they are operating under the auspices of a larger town inside that county. So that larger town has responsibility under the law to make sure they're equipped.
All right. I think we'll leave it right there. I think we're at a good stopping point. We're just about at the witching hour. If you have other further comments, please send them in. We'll try to answer them after the fact. We appreciate everybody's patience. We did have a little Google Hangout audio issue here tonight, but we do appreciate your patience, and we'll be back here next week with another show. If you are, we're going to probably do something a little bit differently, so we may be able to invite more members onto the panel next week. So look forward for information about that as well. All right, we will see you next week.